Hey, welcome to the Web Hosting Basics. Okay, now in this real quick lesson, probably about 15 minutes or so, we're going to go over the different types of web hosting. And the reason why this is important because many people, when they become a webmaster, the first thing they do is they open the cheapest and most inexpensive web hosting they can get. Well, when you're dealing with clients that spend millions of dollars online, or even someone who cares about their business and their e-commerce business enough to know that the speed of their website reflects uh, a lot more than what can be said. For example, their SEO and your SEM, your search engine, we call them SERPs, search engine result pages, where you place on those pages, can get better when you have better speed and reliability and foundation on your hosting. So you don't necessarily want to go with the $2.99 a month hosting. Although many people do that when they're just testing things out. Like if you're just sitting here working and deving and testing, it's okay to open up an account like that and just kind of mess around with it. But when you own your own business and it's your livelihood, you don't want to use that kind of hosting. So let's start out here with something simple, explaining what web hosting is. Okay, your website lives on a server. Okay, that server is called the hosting machine. That server could be any number of configurations, but generally, if back in I would say back in the day, but back when we first started the internet, you could literally think of someone having their own computer and hosting their own website on their computer. Okay, and so, if you took the course earlier and looked at the routing, you could see all the DNS routing. You know how that works. But the hosting machine is ultimately where the website lives. Okay. Now, it can be language centric or even optimized. For example, LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, or MySQL. It's a very open, subjective argument on how to say it. PHP, stacks, or LEMP, which is Linux, Nginx, SQL, and PHP. They're geared towards hosting websites, and they're often tweaked for that purpose. So, meaning if you have a LAMP or a LEMP stack, they're specifically geared towards hosting websites and showing websites based on what traffic they demand from that server. Okay. All right. You pay a monthly fee for a set of included features such as bandwidth or port speed, storage space, and backups. Okay. And there's many other features too. So some of these web hosting companies include CDN and caching and things like that, and their own proprietary caching systems. Many hosts have a panel, which we'll touch up on here shortly. They can be proprietary, as I was explaining, or they can be a mix of proprietary and custom based on other panels' proprietary systems. So, for example, cPanel has a proprietary system, but it also has a way for end developers to customize a theme and layout and overall flow of their proprietary system. It will still modularly look pretty much the same. And Bluehost, for example, does this with their cPanels. They have a custom cPanel that you can log in, and then they iframe their cPanel into their web hosting control panel. Now, web servers, the machines, use a variety of software, and then that software is ultimately called a web server as well. So when we speak the language, what I mean is, I say, well, do you have a web server? Then that obviously means the physical server. Then I say, well, what kind of web server are you running on your server? Sounds kind of redundant, right? Well, the software inside we also call the web server. Okay, so it depends on linguistics here, how you're speaking about it or what you're speaking about. If you're talking about what the web server is on an actual machine, then you're talking about the web serving software. If you're talking about the web server itself, you're talking about the full machine. So a couple examples of web servers: you have Apache, Nginx, Lightspeed, and Lighty. Those are probably the top. Well, aside from Windows, Windows has its own iteration of hosting this stuff too, and they're basically just built on the same sort of information on a LAMP stack. Well, it's called WAMP, obviously, but it's an AMP stack, I should say. They call it WAMP, which is Windows, Apache, SQL, and PHP. Now, this leads us into the different types of hosting, okay? And I'm just going to read these off really quickly, and we're going to touch up on what each one is. You have shared servers, cloud-based instances, dedicated servers, VPS, third-party application servers, and then you have boutique-type hosting, which is catered towards specific types of systems, okay? So shared servers, we're talking about GoDaddy, Bluehost, HostGator. They're very popular low-end hosts that have proprietary adjustments to their panel. So a lot of these use cPanel or Plesk or similar systems, and that's how they started, and then they're trying to migrate away from those or integrate their own system into a proprietary sort of cPanel display. So to give you an example of what that might look at, if you go to HostGator, you can see this is their dashboard. Okay, this is their panel, and I don't want to click around too much here because I have information blurred out on our account. But to give you an idea, this is pretty much it. You come here, and if anything you click on here will take you into a cPanel, almost what's the word I'm looking for? Personalized to their discretion layout of what cPanel is. Okay, so for example, this is what cPanel WHM looks like. WHM is the mother of cPanel. Okay, stands for Web Host Manager, and then cPanel is the access that end users get inside WHM. So if I was to click anywhere in here, it would give me, deeper information. But for an overview, I'm just showing you what WHM does because it's a control panel that can control a whole dedicated server. And then you can sublet your hosting to other people, which is how you get the shared hosting environment. So this is our first environment here. As we go to shared servers, we come back here to WHM. This is a server that is divvied up and shared between potentially hundreds of hosters, okay? And this is how you control it all. This is showing me the processes that are running on the server at this time. And I have some blurred out because there's actual sites on here and stuff that I'm working on or whatever, but neither here nor there. This just shows you all the processes there for a shared server, okay? Now, you tend to want to stay away from shared hosting when you have a business account that you really want the uptime to be optimal, okay? And of course, there's certain features you can sign up for things that allow you to monitor that uptime hosting, but you want the best network you can get and the best server you can afford without going too far overboard. Of course, like you don't want like a 640 gigabyte server for your single site that only gets 100 visitors a month. Okay, when you're starting out, you want to be rational here, and so that's why these different types of hostings will help. Now, cloud-based instances, they're essentially virtual machines in isolated environments, meaning they could all live on the same machine, but they're very isolated in a software sense and container sense that basically gives them their own memory and their own dedicated resources to that. No one can use your other resources because it's limited by software or by virtual means. Okay. Now, a lot of these companies have popped up in the last 10 years. And these are the most important because it's called the cloud. You've probably heard of that, where you can get cloud instances instantaneously and then sort of build your own virtual private cloud for the services that you're trying to do. But you can also host just your site in the cloud. And that's what I do with a lot of sites. Either our own sites, okay, are hosted within DigitalOcean and Linode and Amazon EC2 servers, okay? Now, these examples I give you are all pretty much the same. They run instances and servers. They're not as much as a dedicated server, for example, although some of these companies do have, like Amazon, you can get co-hosted dedicated servers in some cases like that, depending on where you are, if you're close to the location or whatever. But these are virtual machines, essentially, that have limited memory sizes and resources, bandwidth that you can use for your website. And in most cases, almost all cases, these are going to be better than a shared server environment because you're at the mercy of who's using the server the most in the shared server environment, okay? So what would that look like, okay? Here's an example of DigitalOcean, okay? Basically, they're called droplets. That's their proprietary name for these machines. In Linode, they're called Linodes. And you fire up this little machine, and you can put just your site on that machine living there. And you see other things they have in here, like spaces where you can store stuff. You can have your database separate of your site. That's why these virtual cloud-based services are very good and excellent for growth because you can almost fire up something almost in real time. If you outgrow a site and you're getting a spike in traffic, you can, in real time upgrade your services. Okay, so those are cloud-based instances. Then you have dedicated servers. Okay, now dedicated servers are actual physical machines like a computer or a rack in a system that is housed somewhere in someone's data center. A couple popular ones: High Velocity, OVH, and InMotion Hosting. I list those because they're all very credible and they're all very good, and I've used them all. I use High Velocity is good. InMotion is very excellent. They have good customer support. Now, let's take a look at what they do. Okay, these are dedicated servers. All right, these machines here, you can fire one up, and they will actually send you a picture of the rack and the number of your server that's physically placed in one of their racks throughout their data center. And you could choose the data center you want to in most cases. Now, on these dedicated instance servers, I'm not sure you can, but on the custom servers with high velocity, you can certainly choose a location. Although I'm pretty sure here, we'll see here in a moment once this pops up, you can select where, yeah, limited locations. So, and the pricing will change accordingly. But for example, let's say I wanted to fire up a new server in Miami, $45 extra a month. And then I can come in here and sort of change. I can get CentOS, which you wouldn't want to do anyway because it's the end of life is coming soon. But Alma Linux is the sort of replacement for that and allows you to run other systems. If you want Windows, you can select Windows. If you want a control panel, let's say you want cPanel, and you can add cPanel, which is for managing. Again, remember, it's allowing others to access your server and you're managing their site. That's this right here. This is WHM, and cPanel lives within that. So that's the software within a dedicated server. Okay, so next, VPS. Okay, VPS, they're almost like dedicated servers, but think of a dedicated server box cut in half. Okay, and so you get a virtual private server, which is half the server, and the other person gets another half of the server. And it's not always half. It's, you can use a tenth, 3/4. And so here's a couple examples. I think VPS.net gives the best idea of what we're talking about here when we're talking about VPS. This tells you how it slices up that server and what you're going to get, So it's a VPS that has 46 gig of RAM, okay, or 48 gig of RAM, excuse me, or 32 gig of RAM. And let's just pick this one that has 8. So it's probably a 64 gigabyte server, and partitioned in 8 different ways for 8 different users, 8 times 8, 64, or 7 to allow for system resources depending on what software they're running it to virtualize it. But that's the idea, okay? If you don't want to pay for a whole server, this could be useful to you. Now, in many cases, depending again on the setup and virtualization, that can bog your resources down too. And also, it doesn't have the sort of instantaneous growth in most cases, where you can't fire it up in a cloud-based, although VPS.net does have that feature. Many other VPS companies that offer that service don't have the ability to do that, and they have to move you off the physical machine onto another machine because those resources are allocated per type of machine. Okay. Now, third-party applications. Now, what this means is your site is hosted on someone else's type of software, okay? And the perfect example of that is Wix, Squarespace, Webflow, and an e-commerce system like Shopify. So we'll take a look at Shopify because I have lots of clients on Shopify. Shopify allows you to open up an e-commerce store and sell products, okay? And the reason why Shopify is so famous and probably one of the largest e-commerce specific systems is because it has everything built in, and it's modularized the development of add-ons to be a monthly charge for users. So you can open up an e-commerce store and then add, let's say you want some kind of after marketing for email. You can add a plugin for Constant Contact, or a plugin for MailChimp, or a plugin for your custom CRM, whatever CRM you're using, and this can talk to that. Those will cost extra, of course, but this system is an example of just for specific use case for e-commerce. And of course, Wix and Squarespace, the two major competitors in the build your own space. The differences there are Squarespace, if you're an Apple user, it sort of gives you that more like higher echelon, squared off, very clean, very design oriented, whereas Wix gets you down in the nitty gritty where you can even build, move things around even better in their builder and stuff like that. And may not be as well rounded as Squarespace, although if you're a good designer, you can get it there. And then Webflow, think of those two, the business version, and very, very complex to use. I say complex in the sense there's a learning curve because you have to know a lot of code base before you can really jump into Webflow and say, oh, I'm just going to move elements here. Although they try and make it easy as possible. But when you want to do custom things like mouse overs and, opacity changes and stuff like this, or jQuery appearing and disappearing of sections of your website and stuff like that, that can get very complex. Excuse me. I'm dealing with this cold. Now, boutique hosting, this is huge today. Nowadays, boutique hosting is very huge with the advent of WordPress being like 65% market share or something like that of the content management system world. These boutique hosts here, every single one I've listed here is specific to WordPress because that's what they do. So let's take a look at WP Engine, for example, which I have open here. Now with WP Engine, you come in here and you fire up an instance of WordPress, and that instance becomes manageable by itself within your own hosting ecosystem. And it lives on its own, excuse me, cloud virtual instance, just like the what I was referencing here. You can see here, the boutique type hosting is almost always cloud-based instances. So you're on other cloud, you're not probably on a dedicated cloud instance unless you're paying for something higher. There's probably like 20, 30, 40, depending on the size, where you're put on an instance of like cloud, Google Cloud. Google Computing Cloud is very big on these services because Google has obviously come up with ways to perfect the pricing and the optimization of computers because of what they do in their space. Amazon EC2 as well. We use Amazon EC2 in a lot of cases. We have lots of clients that use EC2, and we manage their servers for them. So they're very scalable and they're easy to use in that sense. So again, this is what WP Engine would look like, and the other services are very modular and similar to this. Like if you want to add another site, you can just click here and add a site. If you want to transfer a site to someone, or if you want someone to transfer a site to you, that WordPress install alone will come to you. So what it boils down to is what is good for you? What type of web hosting are you looking for? Now, if you have a WordPress site and you're running a mom and pop shop, an e-commerce, then obviously something boutique might be a good fit for you. Now, if you find that boutique is annoying in the sense that their customer support is very one answer for all, then you probably want to hire someone like myself, a web developer, we called the Webmaster Company. Although I'm a developer, I'm also a webmaster by trade. My company will help manage your stuff, and I don't want to turn this into a pitch of that's what I'm going to. I'm not trying to sell you something. Is what I'm saying. I'm just giving you an example. Go hire someone else. There's other companies out there that will help you manage your website, set it up for you, and you'll get more bang for your buck that way because you can control things to a finite, an infinite level as opposed to a finite level with the boutique hosting. Like there's no root access to a boutique server, okay? But there is root access to a dedicated server in most cases. There is root access to cloud-based instances as well, even though you're in an isolated environment and it's a little different. You get full root access to change and add packages and features that you want, and is good if you're someone that wants to learn a command line, which is something we'll touch up on here as well. So that's the end of this course. It's just meant to give you an introduction to what these different types of hosting are, mostly so you can recognize it and then make an informed choice about what you want to do with these different types of hosting. Okay, so we'll talk about later what type of hosting should you choose. All right, and we look forward to seeing you inside. If you have any questions, Patrick at the Webmaster Company or Patrick at CodeCrunch.com. Thanks.